Get ready to turn on the tube and look back at the Bedtime News with Dave Moore. 40-plus years ago, it was must-see TV every Saturday night here on WCCO. Coming up, we'll revisit this classic program. Welcome to this WCCO TV Classic Special. This is the Pavic Museum of Broadcasting in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. It features one of the country's finest collections of vintage broadcast equipment and classic local programming. Just one look around and memories from WCCO TV's past just seem to come to life. So we decided to dig into the archives and feature one of our favorite local programs, the Bedtime News. During the 60s and early 70s, news anchor Dave Moore wrote, produced, and performed in this late-night satirical wrap-up of the news. For anyone who grew up here, his show was the talk of the town. It was Saturday Night Live, a full decade before its time. Everything was live back then, so very few shows were actually recorded. But luckily, we were able to find enough great highlights to fill the next half hour. Besides clips of the show, you'll hear from people who worked with Dave. So sit back and enjoy what one newspaper critic called the most inventive program on local television, the Bedtime News.
It's ineffective, it's immoral, and it's unnecessary.
But that's just one man's opinion.
That was a bunch of hooey.
No, I don't get any comfort out of that statement.
Boy, look at all that water.
And now the Bedtime News with Dave Moore, brought to you by the Sealy Mattress Company.
When you look back on this day, what will February 1st, 1969 have meant to you? Richard Nixon will remember it as the day he sat around for 3 hours discussing the Middle East with his Security Council. Governor Karl Rovag was kind enough to act out a minor melodrama for us. As he alighted from his limousine, an errant doorman slammed the car door on the governor's pinky, producing a brief performance of the ooh-ooh quick step. And 22-year-old Mary Hardwick of Niagara, New York, will recall February 1st, 1969 as the day she married Edward Larraberry, and thus became Mary Larraberry.
Comedy news shows today are dime a dozen, but at the time, nobody else was doing anything like that.
Dr. Barnard's name will now be stricken from the record books as the first heart transplant surgeon. He will be replaced by Dr. Norman Shumway, who finished second.
Thus, we open another Saturday night edition of the Bedtime News, presented by the Sealy Mattress Company.
Mr. Gillespie, I understand you've been sleeping on a Sealy Posturepedic for 7 years.
Well, I have to get up to go to the...
I didn't mean 7 straight years.
Why don't you say it to me then?
He was very creative, he was very original, and he got a chance with the Bedtime News to use some of these things in a way that he simply couldn't in the regular newscast.
So very briefly, for just a moment here, we'll sneak in and look at the day's highlights. Okay?
One of the things he liked best was that people had to discover the Bedtime News. There was no promotion of the Bedtime News. It was maybe the earliest instance I can remember of buzz marketing.
A fiery host with the speed of light and his faithful film editing companion, Finberg.
The show had zero budget, literally. You couldn't send a photographer out to shoot something. Everything had to be done clandestinely and bootlegged.
Then we have the problem of interviewing in the frozen cold. I mean, even an old pro like Bob Potter has trouble.
Is there any reason, is there any equitable number? It says 5 or more dogs. Could a man have, is there any number in what I'm trying to say where this kind of levels off, John?
Beg your pardon?
So it's more or less open to the type of dog that you have?
Excuse me?
Let's stop and do it again.
My favorite was the Governor Levander thing.
Yes, I think you can say that I'm going to give...
I did that late one night. Just a bunch of ambiguous statements cut together. It didn't make any sense at all.
The input that I would like to make is to
You'd be out with people, and people would say, okay, we got to go home. Bedtime News is coming up. Got to go home. This must be the place that's coming. I mean, people planned their Saturday night around that.
Nancy Nelson's weather report follows this forecast.
I would go into the studio, and the guys would have big map on the floor and the boom camera, and I'd have on my mini skirt and my boots, and Dave would be over there.
We're talking tonight with Mr. Yes, who arrived in our country recently from his native...
Watching Dave do the bedtime news and all of those characters, and he loved it. Loved it. And it was infectious.
I think he can probably tell the story better than I. Which, of course, startled everyone. Wasn't this a lovely day today? The first day this year when spring has finally had a chance to reveal its inspiring decor. When those winter mounds of snow and ice and slag and glop have run out their time, and one can almost reach out and touch the fragrance and the fresh, pristine beauty that abounds everywhere.
He always encouraged you to do a little bit more than you wanted to do.
Yes! It's a magnificent mattress buy. You can tell the world that you're kindly smiling, comforting weather forecaster. Say this is the greatest mattress buy in the whole world. Now will you get out of here? I am a kindly smiling weather forecaster. I am a kindly smiling weather forecaster.
Where do you get your weather from, Bud?
Well, a lot of it comes out of the West.
I mean, all those charts and graphs and instruments you use.
Oh, well, they don't mean very much. I usually call the Weather Bureau.
Call the Weather Bureau?
Yeah, I say, hi there, what's the weather? And I write it down, and then I say it out loud to the folks.
And he loved that interview, and he played it, had an excuse to play it any number of times on the Bedtime News.
If you came home on a Saturday night and you did not know what had happened to the Twins that day or whatever else was going on in sports, just to say we're sports, you would get the scores, okay? You would get the information, even from the news of the day. But then Dave would say, let's take a look at the scoreboard.
For the rest of the scores, let's go to the old scoreboard. Yeah, there's the old scoreboard. I'll never forget the day John was traded to the Baltimore Colts, and we were there first with the story. John, how do you feel about the trade? Huh? The trade, the Vikings trading it to Baltimore for Larry Kramer. When? Well, just this last week.
Ah, come on. You have to go into watching, bedtime news or any of this old television, remembering that they were inventing the wheel.
Due to immature theme, the following program is not intended for viewing by older parents.
In the late 60s, television news saw the dawn of the team approach to newscasting.
People have a real hankering for history here, and people remember Dave Moore vividly and the shows he used to do.
Good evening, I'm Dave Moore.
Hi, Al Austin Moore here.
And we're not related.
You've got to go back and look at this stuff because it's really the blueprint for everything that came afterwards.
That is the way it was.
We've got more of the bedtime news coming up. It's double the fun with highlights from Dave Moore's Sealy mattress commercials.
The difference between us is the difference between night and day. But on one thing we do agree. Sleeping on a Sealy is like sleeping on a cloud. Yes, sleeping on a Sealy is like sleeping on a cloud.
Now the bedtime news, presented against its better judgment, but nevertheless with the best wishes of the Sealy Mattress Company.
And I'm Hank McKnight.
And I'm Frank O'Day.
And we're here to tell you why you should be sleeping on a Sealy Posturepedic.
Sealy has the famous Duralife coil that never relaxes its support, regardless of your weight.
Anybody that watched bedtime news knew who the sponsor was.
Famous because the Sealy Posturepedic is designed in cooperation with leading orthopedic surgeons.
Yeah, orthopedic surgeons.
Where are you going?
I have to go to the bathroom.
6.5 years they've been with us, and not once have they complained about the liberties we've taken with their mattresses. Of course, a lot of people have taken liberties. We've asked Mr. Bruce Quatrain, a noted poet, to read an original work entitled Ode to Sealy. Mr. Bruce Quatrain.
Now?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Oh, how I love thee, Sealy mattress, with soft spun top, all smooth and flatness. The strength within your Duralife coil drives from my bones the pain of toil. And on your lovely quilted cover, I'll never be a jilted lover. Little reference to sex
Yes,
there.
I noticed that.
You're pretty sharp.
Well, I think the Sealy Posturepedic commercials were so creative because at that time they did, the split screen. Dave would have to be Dave, and then he'd have to be this other crazy character. It became the icon of the show.
Oh, truly, you're a bed with class, on which to rest by wearing...
Thank you very much, Bruce Quatrain.
I wasn't done yet.
You were done. You're done for good. Now back to the news, folks.
Well, cripe!
What people don't realize, I mean, now we have technical systems that make all of that easier. At that time, we had none of that.
Our guest is Mr. Cal Konski, shop foreman at the Sealy factory in Tarzan Oaks, Iowa. Nice to see you, Cal.
Thank you, Sid. It is a pleasure for me.
Good.
To be here.
The timing there was incredible, because they'd shoot the first half of it, and then they'd have a monitor that he could look at, and they'd play that back again, and then he'd shoot the second part.
As a Sealy employee for so long, I imagine you yourself sleep on a Sealy Posturepedic.
Well, the truth of the matter is, it's kind of embarrassing now. You know, what with my job and all, I mean, I'm not much of a sleeper. I mean, it's kind of funny, but I just can't sleep.
You're an insomniac.
A what?
I say you're an insomniac.
No, I'm Catholic. I trained about 10 years ago. Me and a father just like that.
I don't think anybody else had ever done anything quite like that, where, especially with one person playing the two parts and working so well together, you'd swear with two different people.
Thanks a lot, Cal.
The pleasure's all mine, Sid. Hope I done good. My mom's watching. What the hell are you kicking me for?
When we were kids, we liked Cal Konski of Tarzan Oaks, Iowa. We liked Hank McKnight and Frank O'Day.
I'm Hank McKnight.
And I'm Frank O'Day. The difference between us is the difference between night and day. But on one thing we do agree. Sleeping on a Sealy is like sleeping on a cloud. Yes, sleeping on a Sealy is like sleeping on a cloud.
It would take him hours to do it, and he would be very proud of it. He'd say, watch, you can't even see the split. And he just had to time things, and they're really amazing, those commercials.
Remember, when you're shopping for a mattress, ask to see the Sealy Posturepedic. And get rid of some of that fat. You look awful. You shouldn't hit that thing so hard, Hank.
My favorite Hank and Frank effort was a one-time shot because the special CD was offering ran out after Hank and Frank had promoted it once. So keep in mind as you watch now, there is no 3-sheet special.
Say, friends, the Sealy Company is about to make you the offer of the century.
Right.
Go ahead, tell them.
Tell them what?
Tell them about the Sealy 3 free sheet offer.
What Sealy 3 free sheet offer?
The Sealy 3 free sheets you get when you buy whatever it is you buy to get the 3 Sealy free sheets with.
What do I want with 3 Sealy free sheets?
Not you, you dumbbell, the people watching.
What people watching?
The people watching to find out what you have to do to get the 3 free sheets they get when they buy what you're going to tell them what to buy to get the 3 free sheets.
Buy what?
Buy the 3 free sheets.
Well, if the 3 free sheets are free, why do you have to buy them?
Don't buy them. Look, there are free sheets, 3 T-shirts.
What, you mean you got 3 T-shirts and 3 free sheets too?
No.
I have friends in advertising who are old enough to remember the Dave Moore spots who claim that they were some of the greatest spots that they ever saw.
His mattress, Sealy, of course. Firm, comfortable, leading the others with a new feature. Coil-on-coil construction that helps you sleep better, sleep sounder than ever before. No firmer, no better mattress for relaxing from this brisk metropolitan pace. Sealy, the big metropolitan mattress.
When we return, Dave pokes fun at some of his favorite targets on the Bedtime News, politicians.
It has been alleged that I was offered a bribe to change my vote.
No one knows.
I believe that something has gone wrong.
Our city has come to a halt.
Everything we're doing is wrong.
This has not been a good year for the politician. But if the Watergate scandal has taught him anything, it's taught him he can no longer hide things from the public. We've noticed that, especially on the local level, where government leaders are showing a new spirit of openness and candor.
Governor, would you tell us why you took a trip to Washington, which was paid for by Mr. Kelm's company on a company credit card?
No.
That's candor.
Any time that Dave was poking fun at you was a compliment. First of all, everybody watched him, He's very, very popular. The fact that he had paid some attention to you, I liked it.
I think it's fair to ask this question.
Why? To offer somebody the choice between something and nothing or something and something, it was far better not to let them have a chance to say no.
You don't have to have a very high political IQ to know that.
I tell people that it was kind of like The Daily Show, 40 years ahead of its time.
During the bedtime news years, things were rather dull at St. Paul's City Hall.
How in God's name are you going to implement it? You don't listen very well, Mr. Schneider. Let me tell you something. Shut your mouth, loudmouth.
We can get in a lot of trouble taking all those politician statements out of context, running them all together like that.
Who's gonna know the difference? Come on, politicians never remember what they say in public anyway.
This is an easy thing to understand. There's nothing complicated about it.
I'm glad he's well paid. It has been alleged that I was offered a bribe to change my vote.
No one knows. I believe that something has gone wrong. Our city has come to a halt. Everything we're doing is wrong.
The way he got away with taking shots at political figures and Mayor Charles Stenvig.
Mayor Stenvig was always an asset to our old bedtime news programs. Actually, we never had to worry about taking his statements out of context. They were out of context when he made them.
You just can't keep spending and spending, but not to the point that our city will not progress and not be a progressive city, and then have the guts to stand up for their convictions and vote it.
There'd be questions. We have shared questions sometimes about how far you can go.
They're asking about attorney generals of the United States who have to resign rather than do an illegal act at the request of their president.
I'm very proud of that record. I wish we could do more.
I think that's what senators are for. They must be stopped.
I'm going to do whatever my attorney says here.
That's not the way to govern, dear friends.
He pretty well covered all of the politicians of worth, and certainly Humphrey was an easy and delightful one.
I guess the fellow that feels that way most of all today is Hubert Humphrey.
Well, let's examine that argument.
There is so much confusion over this thing.
What is at stake?
Got all kinds of pills these days. You can take one to make you feel a little up and take one to make you feel a little down. You can take one that'll make you glide around.
That night, the headline in the St. Paul Dispatch read this way, and I quote,
Brilliant. Able.
The next morning's Pioneer Press had this headline.
The pain and the agony and the tragedy.
I think I'm going to cancel all my newspaper subscriptions.
Well, damn it, I'm not. I know who my friends are.
I think yes and no to that one. Sometimes yes and sometimes no.
The answer to each of these questions must be a resounding no.
Oh, no. Go slow. Veto. Period.
I want to grow up to be a politician and take over this beautiful land.
My memory of anyone who was ever on the bedtime news as a subject of one of Dave's stories is they were utterly thrilled.
Dave was probably the first to do bloopers because of that, reporter bloopers on his show. And it was hilarious because everyone liked to see, they had the, whether it be Rod Challenger.
Challenger was assigned the AFL-CIO convention, speculating on whom the union might endorse as the presidential nominee.
The seriousness of Minnesota labor's disenchantment with the Democratic Party and its presidential candidate will become apparent tomorrow. I didn't do it.
Well, I didn't do it either.
The seriousness of Minnesota labor's... One more time.
Come on, how many times do you need?
The seriousness of Minnesota labor's disenchantment with the Democratic Party and its presidential candidate will become clear tomorrow. That's... Thank you, sir.
I think those days at WCCO in the early 70s, that was the golden age of local television news.
A reporter learns as he or she goes. Now, generally, we start the rookies on basic, simple assignments. Susan Spencer, when she first came to us, for example, was assigned a simple feature story about a family pet.
Come on. Get up here. There we go. You ready? Wait.
Our consumer reporter, Larry Schmidt, spends so much time in supermarkets and restaurants, people think he's just part of the decor.
The main item on the list of ingredients in many of the newer products is sugar, not cereal. In the past few weeks, we've shown how city health officials inspect restaurants for violations of the Food and Beverage Code.
Have a nice day.
Yes. Just about every year, CBS swoops down on us and carries off one of our star reporters. Phil Jones was one of them. This year it was Bob McNamara who has left us to work with CBS in New York. I guess Bob's most impressive work was the day he was stalking thousands and thousands of wild geese.
About 100 yards north of this fence line, there are approximately 200 to 250,000 snow and giant Canadian geese. If you want to see them close, you simply don't walk up and announce yourself. You have to crawl in. For as you'll see, even the slightest movement can set them all into the air. Which is a lot of
It was all done with, you know, tongue-in-cheek, and it showed a human side of us, it showed a human side of Dave Moore, so we really never objected to it, and we kind of enjoyed the notoriety of it.
But the new party primary designation, primary party designation bill. Cut it. But the party primary, why do I keep saying that? The party however, the primary election, the party, but the, damn it.
folks.
We'll be back in just a moment to wrap up this WCCO TV Classic Special on the Bedtime News. Well, I hope you enjoyed reminiscing with us this past half hour. When you think about it, the Bedtime News was so ahead of its time. There was no definition of television back then, not unlike the internet right now. Everyone was experimenting with what would work and how best to use the medium. That's why it's important to look back every once in a while and see how many of the old ideas are reflected in what's new again. Thanks for joining us on this WCCO TV Classic Special. I'm Don Shelby. Goodbye.